Hello, welcome to Workplace Wake Up. I'm Jen Shaw. Every week, I spend about 15 minutes covering key legal developments, introducing you to interesting guests, and providing some entertainment to start your workday. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. This is episode 165. I can't believe it. It doesn't feel like I've recorded 165 of these, but I'm very happy to be with you here today. I cannot believe that we're closing in on the end of February, which is a little crazy. We're going to talk about immigration. And I have waited to talk about this because I was hoping we were going to get a little more clarity about what the administration wants to do. As you know, we've had a number of executive orders that touch on immigration. There's a lot going on. I think there's been a lot of panic. There's been a lot of hysteria. There's been a lot of true concern and fear. And I can't help with much of that. What I can do is help you understand what to do in the workplace. All right. And that's our goal here on this podcast is how do we help you wake up to the realities of the workplace and what we need to do to stay out of court and really avoid problems in any of the crazy areas that we are dealing with right now. So, first thing I want to talk about is obviously President Trump ran for office on a platform of immigration reform. I have not talked to very many people who disagree with that general concept, that there is a problem with immigration and we've got to do something to fix it. Now, there is, of course, a lot of debate about the steps that the administration has already taken. There are a couple things I want you to remember in your role as an HR professional, because this is going to be something that is really going to develop more over time in terms of where we see this immigration focus going. But a couple of things that I want to highlight here for you this morning. First of all, remember that we have a border czar, okay, Tom Homan, and he has told us that the Department of Homeland Security is going to target public safety threats first. He's also said, though, that the agency is going to pursue non-criminal, undocumented workers. Now, keep in mind, some people take the perspective that every undocumented worker is a criminal because they've come into this country illegally, okay? Other people, when they use the term criminal, what they mean is they committed a crime after they came in this country. So when you listen to discussions or debates or news segments about these issues, I think that's a relevant thing to keep in mind is what's our definition of criminal, okay? Now, one of the things we need to know about in the workplace is the difference between a Department of Homeland Security audit and a Department of Homeland Security raid. So if you're going to be audited by the DHS, you're going to get a notice of inspection. And the notice of inspection is going to require you to produce your I-9 forms and any additional records within 3 days. Okay, so this is why we tell you be very careful how you store your I-9 forms. Make sure you can access them. You don't want to give DHS access to any more documents than they need. So it's a good idea to have them in binders or somewhere accessible where what they need is given to them and they don't have access to everything else. Okay. A raid, on the other hand, is a law enforcement activity. It's highly disruptive, obviously. It often involves immediate inspections and detentions, okay? Now, in either case, if you are told there is an audit or there is a raid, you need to call your legal counsel immediately. If it's an audit, you're going to start gathering the documentation they've requested. You want to make sure that you get those documents ready to go before the deadline. You review any government findings, whether they're from ICE or DHS, whoever issues them. And then if there's any errors, you make sure that you point out those errors. So this is where it pays to be very organized. Make sure you know where your information is so that you can respond quickly and meet that 3-day deadline. If you're subject to a raid and there is a warrant, okay, an actual legal warrant for searching your premises, you can ask, of course, to see the warrant. You should call your attorneys, but you should not interfere with the raid in any way. You don't want to do anything that will be seen as interfering or that you're somehow hiding employees who maybe should be required to produce evidence that they have the right to work in the country. You don't want to hide any records. You don't want to do anything like that. And of course, when you have a raid, there's going to be a huge public relations problem, potentially. So right after the president was elected, there was a huge raid in New Jersey. There were several in Chicago. We all heard about them on the news. So you're going to have to think about what you want to do. And I think it's very important to have a discussion with your counsel in advance. If we are raided, what do you want us to do? Like, let's have a strategy. Let's have a plan. Okay. And, the most common businesses that are going to be raided are the garment industry, agriculture, hospitality, hotels and restaurants. So you're really going to want to think about how you're going to handle that. Same thing with an audit. It's going to be less urgent because you've got those 3 days with a DHS audit, but you still want to make sure that you've got a strategy and a plan in place. Now, remember, there have been a whole bunch of executive orders that were issued relating to immigration, right? So the president declared a national emergency at the U.S.-Mexico border. They also designated Mexican cartels as terrorist organizations, which is going to allow there to be more security measures. Of course, that could also result in some disruptions in terms of product and supply chain. So you're going to have to think about that. There was the executive order ending automatic birthright citizenship of children of undocumented folks. That, of course, is subject to appeal by a number of courts are looking at that. And many feel that it violates the 14th Amendment, but we'll just have to see about that. So there's a lot of these things going on. And, just for me personally, it's very sad when I hear children are afraid to go to school. They're afraid to go to church. They don't want to leave their parents' side because they don't want to be sent away, or they don't want their parents to be sent away without them. I wish there was something I could do about that. I can't. I don't know what to do. But certainly from a workplace perspective, you want to make sure that you are transparent with your employees, that you are in compliance with the immigration rules. And if you're not, if you're an employer that has folks who are undocumented and you know it, talk to your lawyer, figure out what you can do. There are some things that you need to get prepared and that you need to be ready to address. So I'm in no way advocating not complying with the law, okay? I just want you to understand that if you're aware that you have undocumented workers, you need to take some action now to figure out what you're going to do about that. Now, we certainly expect more executive orders to come. We fully anticipate mandatory E-Verify. Remember, E-Verify is a web-based tool. It's maintained by the DHS and the Social Security Administration. Employers can use it to confirm the work authorization of new hires. How it works is you gather all this information, you input it into the computer, and then the I-9 site spits out a verification pretty quickly. Obviously, mandatory use of E-Verify is not going to be something that would happen quickly because it's going to take time, but the federal government likely could mandate that. They have what's called occupied the field when it comes to immigration. So they probably would be able to do that if they wanted to. We're also looking at H-1B reform. H-1B visas, remember, allow employers to hire a limited number of highly educated workers from outside of the U.S. in occupations that require specialized knowledge, the tech community, for example. That may be why so many members of the tech community were there at the inauguration. But the idea is interesting because there are also parts of the Republican Party that have said they want to completely eliminate the H-1B program. So it's not clear if this administration is going to focus on growing it or eliminating it. But if you use H-1Bs or you need that highly technical, highly specialized labor, you're going to want to get some help in this area from an immigration lawyer. Also remember that There is going to be a realignment of the U.S. Mexico-Canada Pact. That was the free trade agreement that replaced NAFTA. It looks like there's going to be a joint review in 2026. And if the U.S. pulls out of the accord, which would take 10 years, that's going to have a huge impact on American workers, ranchers, farmers, service providers, et cetera, not to mention all of the visas. So it's just going to be interesting to see how that all shakes out. Okay, what should you be doing right now? First of all, make sure that you're following the rules for the I-9. Okay, you just are not going to be able to get away with failing to do so anymore. So if you just have had a hard time recruiting, which I am completely sympathetic to, and you know that you have some undocumented workers, you've got to deal with that. And going forward, you need to make sure that you're following all of the requirements for I-9 compliance. You should be conducting regular I-9 self-audits. That will help you identify any discrepancies. Of course, if you work with your outside counsel or your in-house counsel on those initiatives, those audits, you're going to make sure you have the most up-to-date legal information, and there also will be some privilege attached to the process, which is good. Everybody needs to understand how immigration compliance works. So managers, supervisors, HR staff need to be trained what to do if they suspect somebody may be using, for example, fraudulent identity documents or right to work documents. You want to make sure that everybody really understands what the expectations are. You might consider using E-Verify. It's not mandatory yet. It really will not surprise me if we end up with that at some point. You may decide that you want to use it voluntarily. And it certainly is helpful in terms of providing you some reduced penalties and maybe even no penalties at all if you can show that you followed the procedures required by E-Verify. There are some downsides to using E-Verify. There are agreements you have to enter. The government has access to a lot of information, which you may not like. But the bottom line is, it may be something you need to consider at this point. President Trump's election, whether you supported him or not, is having a tremendous impact on the work environment. It cannot be overstated. So it is not business as usual. You are not going to be able to just hold out for the next 4 years and then wait to see who else is elected. That's just not going to happen. So you want to make sure that you are prepared for that. Another thing I want to mention about the raids is if you feel like you are in an industry that is likely to be targeted for a raid, you really do need to have a plan. I talked about that a moment ago. But when ICE comes knocking at your door, you're going to need to really understand what you can and can't say. You're going to want to consult with both immigration counsel and employment law counsel. You're going to have to make sure that warrants are valid. You're going to have to follow what the ICE agents are doing. So, it's one of those things where you're really going to get a benefit from planning ahead. So whether it's doing those Form I-9 self-audits or coming up with some sort of a response plan for a raid, this immigration focus is a big part of this administration. It is not going to go away. So we have to figure out what our strategy is going to be and how we're going to deal with these challenges. It's heartbreaking on a personal level for many, many folks. And like I said, I wish there was more that I could do about that. What I can say is work with your employees, make sure that you know what's really going on, get them the help they need, do what you can, but understand, the vast majority of Americans support having folks who have engaged in criminal activity while they're here, have them deported, right? So there are parts of these immigration reforms that I think a lot of people can get their arms around. Some of the workplace issues are a little more challenging, and we're just going to have to see where they go. Thank you so much for your time today, everyone. I hope you know what an honor it is for me to have you listen to these podcasts. It is such a privilege to be able to share this information with all of you. And I'm just grateful for the time you spend with me. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and I'll see you next time. Workplace Wake Up, including our guests and hosts, do not provide legal advice in this podcast. Do not act upon any of the information discussed in this podcast without first consulting a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to spread the word, please share it with others, post about it on social media, and/or rate and review it. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, and email us at info@shawlawgroup.com.